It really speaks to the unconscious guarding, holding, bracing patterns within the tissues and fascia of the genitalia and pelvis that we all experience. And what's fascinating is up to 70 or 80% of that really stems from issues that don't involve sexuality at all. They stem from issues of safety, security from when we're children, and they live and show up in our intimate lives as adults.
As you say, our sexualities are expressions of all aspects of our lives, particularly when trauma has been involved. And that is left out a lot, that whatever we've been through is who we are and how we're going to express ourselves in all ways, and particularly in sexuality. So I really appreciate even beginning this conversation with this more holistic understanding of sexuality rather than this very sequestered and, of course, often shamed and distorted perspective on sexuality, as if it's just this secret little part of us that's only expressed in these very restrictive and restricted kinds of ways. So, what if your body is not something you have, but is something you are? Welcome to the Brilliant Body Podcast. I'm your host, Ali Mezey, somatic therapist and sexologist with a lifelong fascination for the challenges and opportunities in being the bodies that we are. Join me and other body masters as we explore the art, science, and brilliance of the body, debunking the mind-body split and expanding the meaning and experience of intelligence way beyond mere thinking. Let's delve in. First and foremost, I just want to thank you all for being here because it's such a special opportunity to be with my friend and colleague, Rahi, who knows so much, as do I, in the realm of sexuality, not just professionally, but because we're so interested in it personally. I'm going to start by asking Rahi a couple burning questions that I've been sitting on for the last couple months since he was a guest on my podcast. And then he's going to ask me a couple questions, which I'm really excited to hear what those are going to be. And
They're
then we're
also burning, by the way.
oh, good. Excellent. And then we're going to open it up to you folks to ask whatever you want to ask of us, either questions you've brought with you, questions you may have had for decades in your life and haven't found the time and place and people to ask, or they might arise just organically as you're listening to this conversation. Also, I want to acknowledge that the topic of sexuality is a tender one for a lot of us. So it usually tends to take a lot of courage for people to show up and participate publicly in any regard to sexuality, unless it is a completely comfortable and natural habitat for you, which it is for a small portion of the population. But the rest of us might feel kind of vulnerable to be discussing such things. So I just want to acknowledge the tenderness potentially, particularly if there's been any sexual trauma in your history, which is certainly the case for many of us. Anything you want to add to that, Rahi, before I do a little intro?
No, I just want to echo how sensitive and tender and vulnerable a topic this is, and how we really want to invite and honor any tender parts to come forward and, yeah, to be honored.
Yeah. Speaking of which, it's always, always, always good to just remind ourselves that we are the bodies that we can sometimes forget to experience in any given moment. So just notice, even with a little movement, or just maybe rub your thighs or your forearms or your hands together, just move your rib cage or your pelvis on your chair or sofa or bed, whatever you're sitting on, just to remind yourself of your body intelligence and presence, and that you are all of this experience, not just what you're thinking. So I'm Ali Mezey, and I've been fascinated by the body's intelligence since I was very young. I didn't really understand that's what I was up to, but indeed, everything I have been doing throughout my life has been about that, to understand why is it that my body knows so much, and or why is it that I don't know as much as my body must know about a variety of things? And how do I find out more about what it knows, what I know as the body that I am? I grew up as a dancer. I have navigated multiple injuries throughout my life. I've navigated different kinds of sexual abuse and also maintained this profound sense of sexuality being my native terrain, so to speak. It's always been something I have loved so much, despite what I have suffered as a part of sexual expression and sexual experience. And it remains one of my greatest joys when I have the great opportunity to experience it in the way that I hope to, long to, and am capable of. So that is for me something that is so missing a lot in the world of sexology and sex positivity, in my experience, is that even in those realms, sexuality can be presented in a way that makes it sound like people are just having these explosive, orgasmic, polyamorous freedoms and experiencing all this stuff that the rest of us are like, why aren't I experiencing that? Or I am experiencing it, and yet something's missing, or my body is quote unquote betraying me, or I'm somehow not experiencing the pleasure or the body life that I want to. So I'm particularly interested in how to help people through different kinds of work that I do. The main one now being personal geometry, which after years of working as a constellation facilitator, I really came to streamline and understand that applying the innate language of spatial relationship was one of the fastest ways to find out what the body knows about pretty much everything. So that's a big focus of my work life right now, is helping people access what their bodies know about sexuality challenges. I also worked for years in addiction rehab centers, so I have an expertise working with addiction in this way and really getting to what the body knows about how that addiction is functioning. Super successful. And I continue to make media, which is really near and dear to my heart through the podcast and some other projects I'm working on, because I really believe and know that the body is brilliant and that it can help us to understand and overcome so many of the challenges that we face that perhaps are really unnecessary. And also, my view of sexuality is that I'm not after this particular, well, I kind of am sometimes, to be honest, because I also can grapple with that comparative thing of hearing, oh, other people say they're experiencing this. I want to experience that, but I'm not. Why not? That can be true. And what I understand more and more and more is it's not about reaching some particular goal, whether that be climax or multi orgasms or a certain kind of orgasm, et cetera, but to really be more and more in the authentic expression of whatever it is I am and am not experiencing, not just physically, but emotionally, sensationally, psychically, energetically, spiritually, in all of these ways. So that's really the quality of sexual expression that I'm very much committed to and advocating for. So I hope that gives you a sense of my background, and I hope that gives a sense of my perspective and my heart. So there you go. Rahi, who are
Uh,
you? What are you doing?
Thank you, Ali. I'm inspired by your sharing of your journey. Beautiful. And I love what a champion you are for the body. So my name is Rahi Chun, and my journey really started from the way I came out of my mom's womb. I came out with my legs mangled, and the doctors wanted to do surgery on my infant knees. But my mom, being a nurse, said no, and instead she lotioned and massaged my legs every night for 3 years. And so eventually my legs were like this, straightened, and came out like this. So my body really experienced that first healing through touch. And so as I grew up, I massaged both my parents and was really fascinated with that healing potential of touch. And I would say the next pivotal experience for me was being introduced to a Taoist teacher, Montauk Chia, and his work was all about the conscious circulation of sexual energy. And so just combining these interests of the healing potential of touch with conscious energy fascinated me. And eventually, I just found in my personal life that this combination led to spontaneous healing in the people in my life. And so over the years, I got a master's in psychology, and I was really drawn to a modality called neuroaffective touch, which examines how our initial touch and relational imprints as infants and children affect certain guarding patterns in the body. And by that time, I was a somatic sex educator. So I took the training through the lens of how do our initial touch and relational imprints affect our adult sexuality patterns, behaviors, and desires. And what I relate with so deeply with Ali's work is the way that personal geometry really gets to the root of a lot of symptoms that show up in sexuality, whether it be anorgasmia or premature ejaculation or erection issues. People are addressing the symptoms, but not really understanding the root. And that's what's so brilliant about personal geometry. And I find that in my work, I've developed an expertise in a realm called genital de-armoring. I just ended up studying genital de-armoring from the Taoist perspective, the tantric perspective, psychosomatic perspective, and the pleasures perspective. And there too, the root is usually not what people think it is. And it usually gets threaded back to our childhood and those initial touch and relational imprints that are informing our adult behavior. So that's my realm of expertise. Genital de-armoring evolved organically just out of my interest. And I teach it internationally, I teach it online. And yeah, I find that it's a fascinating window to our psyche and our journey as human souls. And that's part of my fascination with it.
It's fantastic, Rahi. Well, I haven't taken one of your classes yet, but I really want to. And I highly recommend to anybody and everybody to, well, take both of our courses and classes and offerings because we're definitely up to some really cutting edge things. I was going to start with a different question, but I think because of what you just said about people treating symptoms in general and not really getting to the root causes, I was just listening to a podcast this afternoon that was about erectile dysfunction, quote unquote, wanting to learn more about it. And it was with a urologist. And so far, anyway, and I didn't listen to the whole thing yet, but they were describing any kind of dysfunction. And to be fair, they were taking exception to that word. They did not like the word dysfunction because their view was that it's more an expression of a variety of different things, yet they were all physical. It was all about, well, it could be about the vascularity due to your heart. It could be about this. It could be about that. It was all physical. And even when they were discussing nocturnal erections, none of it had to do with the psyche of the whole being whose penis it is. None of it. None of it was, sorry, I'm getting passionate about this because so many people view the genitals as stupid, as not sentient, as not an expression of who we are. So I want to start with that, Rahi. You're the perfect person to talk to about this. One, because of the work you do, and also because you're a man body. That's so much erectile expression. And I know this from being with partners with penises, that from moment to moment, there is change of tissue and vascularity in part because it has to do also with, do they feel safe? Do they feel focused? Do they feel connected? Do they feel cared for? But I want to repeat, do they feel safe? And so much of masculine sexuality isn't given the respect to acknowledge that man people, all people need to feel safe. It isn't just for women. And so that's it's more like a paragraph rather than a question, but I just want to say that to you and see how you wanted to respond to that, because I don't hear it spoken about even amongst all these sexuality people and doctor people and sex therapist people. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah. I'm happy to respond as a man person, and I love your enthusiasm. Um, I'm going to start with something you spoke to, which is really, really important. And that is that genitals respond with wisdom and brilliance. There's a reason why a body is not getting erect or lubricated or isn't feeling sensation or is feeling guarded. It's from the innate wisdom of the body and the genitalia. To your point, Allie, if someone is not feeling safe emotionally, much less physically, it's going to affect the nervous system. We know that when the body goes into fight, flight, or fawn, it's going to affect the oxytocin flow, the oxygenation of the blood, which affects tissue sensitivity, which affects blood flow. These are very baseline physiological functioning that affects erections. But then when you go underneath and examine the person's relationship with their genitals and relationship with erection. The reason I say relationship with erection, I had one client who had erection choice. I call it choice instead of dysfunction, erection choice challenges. And when we got down to the nitty gritty, he witnessed his father physically abuse his mother. And his father was kind of this typical aggro, wife beater shirt, tough guy. And he associated his erect penis with that image. And he did not want to be that, which is why he had erection choice issues. So this gets to the very heart of what is the root issue. He can take nitric oxide and Viagra and this and that, but unless you address that root issue, unless you can be vulnerable enough
Yeah.
to feel the anger and the pain of those experiences, you're not going to get to the root issue. And then once we address that, then it's a question of if there's years of armor that's formed as a result of his psychological pain of not wanting to be his father, then, that needs to be released from the tissues and physiology as well. But back to the main point, Allie, the genitals are infinitely wise and they are responding for a very wise reason. Our job is to investigate and inquire and create a safe enough space for the body to tell us why it's responding the way it is out of its innate wisdom to survive.
Yeah. And I also want to acknowledge how aging is such a gift in a variety of ways, but specifically that you can't go on autopilot with your genitals anymore. And particularly penis people become all the more honest. They can't necessarily override and go into that testosterone place, or female bodies included. I mean, I would put myself in all kinds of situations where there would be a disconnect, which is why I work a lot with the heart sexuality split, because my sexuality would be raring to go and really be attracted to somebody that I wouldn't feel safe with. So there's can be such an incongruency that the genitals get sort of slammed in the middle of. And as you were just speaking to too, is they can be the most honest. And because penises are visible in a way that internal female responsiveness or lack thereof is not as obvious, they can't get away with lying. And I think this is a beautiful thing, but also brings to the fore the challenges that so many couplings have, which is people aren't comfortable speaking about and speaking to the truth of what they're actually experiencing, even with the people with whom they're trying to experience it, which I always find mind boggling. So much of the available and possible intimacy of what is true on all levels isn't available to people because they never learn to talk about it or take the risk to go, wow, I actually want to say it's not working. I'm not going to just roll over in shame here. I'm not feeling safe here. And this is why. I don't know how you feel about me. I don't know if you really want to be in a relationship. I don't know if you're still seeing your ex. I don't know if you're whatever the issue really is that penis or those genitals, whatever they may be, are actually expressing or exposing non-verbally. Yeah.
The psychological aspect of it is huge. I was listening to this one podcast with a great urologist who specializes with ED,
Mhm.
and he was saying how in a large percentage of his clients, the one time a client, a man body, will not have the erection they want, they start building this anxiety like, oh, what if it happens again?
Yeah.
And it's that psychological factor that causes the stress in the body that prevents the blood flow from really engorging their penis. And it's akin to my female clients who are inorgasmic. When they come in, they're so focused on orgasm that when their pleasure starts to build and build and build, rather than staying in their body, they get into their heads
Yeah.
and start to wonder, is this going to be the time? Am I getting closer? Which kills any kind of organic, natural arousal and pleasure response. But with men, with male bodies, it's very similar. The one time they, for whatever reason, as you're pointing out, Ali, it could be emotional, it could be physiological, it could be psychological. For some reason, they don't get the erection. It's stuck in their head, and that becomes the monster that becomes the source of their erection choice challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about female bodies too,
Yes.
specifically around orgasm. I was just did this beautiful Eventbrite actually last week, personal geometry, exploring our relationship to orgasm. It was so interesting because, of course, that's a complicated relationship for a lot of us. And one of the things that we were talking about is how right before a female orgasm, there can be this panic, this fear that you just spoke to that can be like, it's not going to happen. They're going to stop before it's going to happen. They don't really want to be doing what they're doing in order to make it happen. I've already taken too much of their time and effort, i.e., maybe I'm not worth it. Maybe they don't really want to do it, i.e., men just want to get off and that they don't care about my pleasure. So even when they're telling me they want to give me pleasure, I don't believe them, et cetera, like a bunch of different really interesting things that happen almost pre-verbally or in a jumble in that last minute or two where that climax either prevails or it
Mhm.
doesn't and it just deflates. But somebody brought up something I think is so fascinating, which was, again, this nonverbal place. And I don't know if it happens in man people or not, but I've asked a few women lately and they recognize this place too. That's almost this existential fear of annihilation. I don't know if anyone relates to that, but almost like somehow, if this happens, something dangerous could happen. Like if I actually climax, I could die. And it's not conscious. It's hard to make that conscious. That's actually kind of happening. And of course, in French, it's named that, but I think it's something else. And I'm trying to understand it within myself to reverse psychology it and go, well, if I do climax, how would that change? Not, oh my God, I'm not going to. But what if I did? Am I going to bond to somebody who doesn't love me? Am I going to become addicted to them because I'm going to want more of these? What bad thing is going to happen to me? Does anybody relate to what I just said at all?
Yes,
Oh,
yes. I see what
awesome.
you're doing it.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm curious what
Oh,
you know about this professionally and personally.
sure, sure.
And
Uh,
whether male people have the same thing, whether it's a similar, I've never heard a man express anything like that. Maybe your Montauk Chia understanding can help us understand another layer of why this is so deeply vulnerable in a way that, good old sex liberation just misses altogether. That there really is something extraordinary and risky about deep sexual contact, you know?
yes, yes, absolutely. It is the surrender of the ego. It is. It is. It's surrendering to something that's greater than us, greater than our identity, greater than what we know, and surrendering into the unknown. And this is where I feel like our initial relational and love imprints play a role in our relationship with orgasm. So if surrendering to safety, a safe, intimate relational dynamic was not so safe,
Yeah.
that as we approach orgasm, there's going to be protection, there's going to be guardrails, there's going to be a pause and a pulling back because I mean, that's our survival as a child. Was our home safe to surrender to something greater than us?
Yeah.
So, all of those things, Allie, that occur just at the precipice of orgasm are very real and they do happen for man bodies as well, but I
Mhm.
think in a different way. This is where the brilliance of the body's memory comes in because I have a lot of clients who are female and in their teens and 20s, into their 30s, and even into their 40s, because their partners didn't understand their arousal anatomy, they went on a build, and then their partner, if it's in a heterosexual relationship, essentially released first,
Mhm.
rolled over, went to sleep. That memory is in their body. So as they're building, they're just on an unconscious and sometimes conscious level, they're just like, oh, please, this one time, can it be about me first? All of these things. And this is very tender. This is about what you alluded to. Do I deserve it? Am I worth it? And on some level, will they love me enough to stay with me until I have my experience? And then I think for a lot of man bodies, as they're approaching climax, there have been so many instances for a lot of men where they didn't fulfill their female partners. And there's decades of that memory.
Whether wanted to, but didn't know how to and couldn't ask. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for them, ejaculating before their partner is satisfied leads to a deep disappointment and a sense of failure.
Yes.
So all of these things live in the tissues of our genitalia and can create desensitization, armor that can lead to intimacy patterns that are not about what's happening now, but
Mhm.
it's like this history of lovers that we're bringing into our bed with our current lover.
Yeah. So true.
But I would say the relationship with orgasm is fascinating because there's so many different layers to it. And I wanted to ask you, Allie,
Mhm.
uh, we talked about this when I interviewed you on my podcast, how complex it is, how it involves past lovers, good enough, worth, and all of that. And I'm curious when you facilitate personal geometry with clients, and a personal geometry is revealed in regards to their relationship with their orgasm. When people realize that their inorgasmia is a result of their unresolved issue with their mother or their past lover or a trauma, how does that right relationship get restored in personal geometry? Because
Mhm.
then they're able to externalize what they're feeling internally. They're able to see, oh, that's what it is. How do you then go about resolving that? Or how does the client go about resolving that?
Okay, so I'm going to give you just example off the top of my head. And for folks who don't know what personal geometry is, it's a method I've refined over the last many years to help people externalize their internal body maps so that by using this innate language of spatial relationship, we can see and feel how we experience any given relationship to other people, things, aspects of self. So if I ask somebody to use either sticky notes or mats on the floor or salt shakers for that matter, and to place one to represent themselves and one to represent, so I'm going to just really quickly diagram this just so you can see it because most of us immediately understand it and it's worth 1,000 words. So if I ask somebody to place self and orgasm, let's just say, for example, my experience is I'm here looking up. Orgasm is here about 5 feet away from me, looking right at me because it's something that feels a bit far away, but I can see it. It can see me. And I'm really wanting it. It's on my mind a lot. It's what's right in front of me. And I look at it a lot. It's concerning to me. And then in listening to them, they're still hung up about somebody or somebody really hurt them. Let's say it's an ex of some kind. And I ask them, where would you place that? And they put it right here, for example, then suddenly They can't even see orgasm anymore because their ex is right in front of them. And in fact, psychically, emotionally, that is what they're seeing as a body. Because this is flat, remember? It's if they're standing here and their ex is standing in front of them. So, in relationship, this might not be true in relation to money, but in relation to orgasm, the ex is still part of the map that is obscuring their view and their energetic access to orgasm because they can't even see it anymore. Every time they're looking towards or wanting orgasm on some level, that X is there. So, to answer your question, what do you do about that? Usually, there's something that needs to be seen, said, felt, and resolved here, of course, in order to be able to move this so that orgasm can approach, so that it can get closer, so that that relationship can change. And it may seem like these are just pieces of paper, but they are an immediate expression of the truth of what they are actually experiencing, which is validated over and over by the relief that people experience when they actually see it in front of them. And you can all do this at home. Place one for you, place one for orgasm. This thing is becoming about orgasm, Rahi. It's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
love it.
And you can see, is it near? Is it close to you? Can it see you if it had eyes? Is its back turned? Is it right in reach? Is it underneath? Is it on top? Because I'm constantly obsessed with it or masturbating all the time. Or is it who I view myself as being because I'm really good at that? And that's how people view me is like, oh, well, at least I can come. Therefore, I'm valuable as a human and as a partner, but they don't necessarily see how vulnerable I feel in my heart. It's amazingly expressive of the truth of whatever that relationship is in any given moment because it'll be different each time you do it. So, again, answer your question how you resolve it is first by seeing it, making it conscious, feeling what it's been like for you, and then, particularly with the help of some facilitation, getting to really recognize what's unfinished about it and what is, I love what you just said about choice, erectile choice, finding the agency to recognize that I don't want that map to be that way anymore. I don't want my ex to be blocking my way to orgasm anymore. I'm done there. Maybe I need to go plant a tree. Maybe I need to go write a letter. Maybe I need to go primal screen. Maybe I need to say, fuck you. Maybe I need to get a therapist, whatever it is.
I just wanted to touch upon something you shared, which is your relationship to orgasm, and then you gave the example of one's relationship to wealth. And I feel like that can be the root cause, actually. In the same way, there's a glass ceiling that people have in the professional life. I see people have a joy ceiling or a pleasure ceiling.
I wanted to ask you about that. It was on my
Yeah.
list. Yeah.
Yes. So the joy ceiling or the pleasure ceiling that people have towards resisting feeling too good, it could be, as we mentioned, a resistance to surrendering into the unknown or the resistance to feeling like they deserve more. But a lot of times it is some traumatic event of loss in their childhood that they have not grieved fully. So, for example, I had a client once before she turned 5, she lost her beloved grandfather, her horse, and her dog. And she never grieved these things before she was 5 years old. So in the sessions, she resisted feeling too good because feeling good on the other side of that was this profound loss that had not left her psyche. You know, when you drew that map, you shared about how the relationship to orgasm can often be a relationship one has to their joy ceiling, their pleasure ceiling, or their unprocessed grief around loss.
I love that. I think that's brilliant. And also, what I will do when there's time is to not just have people map orgasm, or what I'm really meaning by that is actual climax, but to map pleasure itself. Because people might be very comfortable with pleasure, but not with climax, and vice versa.
Mhm.
So I think that's incredibly important to add because, of course, there is so much focus in sexuality on genitals and not on the sensuality and the pleasure, the full body pleasure and really validation and comfort and communication that happens with including a whole body, which isn't just this myriad of sensations of touch with the skin all over in different places, which is just a orchestra of different options and textures and sensations and energetic releases. But it's also that, as you were saying about the genitals, Rahi, is that the history that we are is throughout all of us. And images will arise, and memories, and positive emotion, and negative emotion, and everything in between when the whole body is included. So, adding that too. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. There were so many things that you shared that prompted a response, but I couldn't keep track of them all. And now I'm like, there's so much.
I know we could blab on and explore for hours, but I do want to give people an opportunity to share. Does anybody want to ask anything of either of us? Oh, I didn't want to laugh too much. I realized I stopped my pleasure reservoir because I did not want to laugh too much. So, does that mean for you, orgasm and humor are very linked, or is it joy specifically? Too relaxing? You mean if you laugh too much, you would relax so much that you might have an orgasm and then that would be dangerous? Is that the loop? Is that kind of the progression? Losing pee, huh? Oh,
Wait, so is that the fear then? The fear is in losing pee and embarrassing? Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just sharing this because it's coming up. A lot of people are into pee play, just FYI. And I had a partner who wanted to be peed on, and just sharing that there's a lot of possibilities of what you can do here. If that is the thing that is preventing you from really experiencing the full pleasure of your body, the embarrassment of pee, makes me curious about how you were reared, how you were taught potty training, whether it was really shamed. So that's one area that can be explored. But the other area is to really eroticize and make it fun. Yes.
I want to just add to that that there is a lot of confusion too about what is female ejaculate and what is pee. Rahi, on one of the episodes, I don't remember if it was on mine or your podcast, we really went into that a bit. Okay, so this is more about an incontinence thing. It looks like I was losing drops, which can be a pelvic floor issue. Have you had children, by the way? Have you had children? Yeah. So Rahi's a sexological body worker and has done a lot more hands-in work than I have. He'll speak to when there's been scar tissue. Oh, when you were 10, or have you had children? So that can also be even very young, besides the shaming aspect of it, that there could have been a pelvic floor issue. Rahi, you speak to that, would you?
Sure. I don't know what country you're in America, the postpartum process is a little, what's the word? Barbaric. After someone gives birth, which is an incredibly spiritual and it's such an initiation for the body. Usually there's a 6-week postpartum checkup and it's very perfunctory. It doesn't really go into how the body is really metabolizing and integrating. And so incontinence can happen very commonly. And there are ways, there's the jade egg practice, there are ways to strengthen those muscles so that incontinence is not an issue. It could also be that there are certain muscles that are actually too firm. If there are certain muscles that are too tense, what you want is dexterity. So it could be a matter of identifying what muscles are too tense, what muscles are too loose, and bringing dexterity to the pelvic bowl. There's also a process called heel stripping, which releases the tense areas. But if that is what's preventing the surrender to orgasmic pleasure, yeah, I would say once again, examine when you were 10, how you were shamed, how you internalized that, see if there's healing or a ritual or something you can do around normalizing this process of urine, and then really addressing physiologically how to strengthen those pelvic floor muscles so that that doesn't happen. I was in Ellen Heath's scar tissue remediation training, and there are these exercises that are quite effective specifically for incontinence. I can run to my bookshelf, but it's in another room. and look for that book. But essentially, they're core exercises you do lying on your back with your feet against the wall, and they're quite effective for addressing incontinence. So there are ways of addressing it.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna add, having been a body worker forever, that a lot of people, particularly children, break or damage their tailbones, and this can very much affect the architecture and the innervation, the nerves in the pelvic floor, and could really be affecting continence as well and pelvic floor balance. So you might have certain muscles that are too tight and others that are too loose, or have lost some innervation, some nerve flow into parts of your either your clitoris or urethra. And it's super underdiagnosed. It pisses me off. Even orthopedics will not check people's tailbones or really even acknowledge the whole structure of the pelvis and how much tailbones influence what we do and don't feel, which, by the way, can also really affect orgasmicity in all genders. So just want to put that on people's radars too, since apparently it's not on most people's at all, which is very sad, since I would say at least 50% of the population have some degree of tailbone disturbance, if not damage. Yeah.
We had some great comments come in that the pelvic floor work doesn't always solve issues with many bladder issues. If you're neurodivergent, you're highly likely to have connective tissue issues. To your point, Allie, there could be many root causes to it. And these are just some things to check out that we're mentioning. But proper assessment is really important.
And I also just want to reiterate that it is possible in certain contexts, if there's arousal happening, that there could be a conflation between it being pee and actual excitation and actual ejaculate. And there can be a mixture of some pee and some ejaculate involved. And that it can be, of course, highly erotic for a lot of people and a lot of partners. But the bottom line is, I'm going to loop back around to this authenticity issue, is if you're not with a partner who can work through that with you and get towels or get a waterproof mattress pad or experiment or get a massage table and do one-way touch or really experiment, so you can even risk that you're going to piss all over the place and they'll still be there and not judge you and love you and let you come in your pile of piss or whatever it is. Like, staying in that authentic exploration with somebody who isn't going to shame you is just gold. And if the person you're with isn't up for that, then it's a question of, is that the right person? What do you think, Rahi?
Yeah, I want to echo that by sharing that data-driven studies have shown that the emotional connection between lovers is the greatest indicator of sexual pleasure. So it is that emotional, intimate, vulnerable bonding and sharing that leads to that sense of safety and trust, which relaxes the nervous system to go to places it may not have gone before. I also want to share, I had a couple, I think they were like 78 and 82 years old in my genital de-armoring course. And by the end of it, they realized they actually wanted deeper intimacy and not wanting to learn sexual techniques. They thought the way to get to deeper intimacy was to learn sexual techniques. But that was such a beautiful reflection at their age that what we're really all wanting is deeper intimacy, wanting to be seen, wanting to be loved in all the ways we show up. And yeah, sexuality can be a potent way of getting there.
I don't know, Rahi. I don't know if everybody wants that. I don't think everybody does. I think they do in their heart of hearts and body of bodies, but I think that people are really scared and that some of us want it more than others and have to find other people who want it as much as we do. That's
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think our nature as human beings is that, like in the neuroaffective touch training, they were really big on sharing that in the same way plants gravitate towards the sun for nourishment, we human vessels gravitate towards connection and aliveness. That's our nature. But I think it's all of the fears and conditioning and trauma, all the things that you've been mentioning that create this different protective shielding that shows up in our bodies that makes us want to perform instead of connect or achieve instead of really be vulnerable.
Totally. I mean, I was just thinking about even with the podcast, like, oh my God, my dog's barking. That's bad. That's not supposed to be heard and it's supposed to happen. And, that is being performative. And even in my own mind, yeah, you couldn't even talk.
No, neither could I.
Oh, it's so funny. But that's a perfect metaphor for what we're talking
Yeah,
about. You might be worried about pee trickling out of you, but probably the person you're with is so enraptured with how beautiful you are that they don't even notice, you know?
right.
It's just amazing. Does anybody else have a question? Either to put in the chat or to just unmute yourself and ask us what you want to know.
I wanted to highlight a comment that a lot of men's failure, the comment is men's failure to please a woman results in their putting more pressure on the woman to orgasm, which happens so often.
So
I
often.
feel like part of men's conditioning in our culture, I mean, it happens since we were kids and we engage in sports, which is all about scoring a goal and winning and achieving and results. And that shows up naturally in the bedroom, where I think a lot of men feel like their sense of value and worth comes from scoring the orgasm or providing some sort of result rather than it being about intimate, authentic connection. Then the woman or the partner feels like they're being used, feels like they need to ejaculate or have an orgasm in order to please, in order for the guy to be assured. And then it leads to a lot of fake orgasms and authenticity goes out the window.
Totally. Because of course, cisgender girls are raised that at all costs we have to take care of men's egos. I don't know about in younger generations, but certainly growing up in the 60s and 70s, that's what we were taught. We want men to feel like they're great and they're successful and they're fabulous, even while we're disappointed in ourselves and in them. And another snooze of an experience. Or some of us learn like, okay, I'm going to have to be responsible for my own pleasure, either in communicating it, which means I've got to know what pleases me, be able to communicate it. You can be very good at those two things, and the other person still can't deliver that, which can be very disappointing.
It'd be heartbreaking.
Thank you. It can be very heartbreaking and disappointing. And then let's say they can deliver it. And then you're in the situation we talked about at the beginning, which is, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. What if they can deliver that pleasure, but they're, for all I know, sleeping with 3 other people? So there's another area where there isn't full authenticity. Like, I don't even know what our situation is here. To what extent can I really give into this and give to this and be given to in this? Yeah, there's so much we don't discuss, isn't there? So
Yeah.
it's
Yes. I want to touch on one thing, Allie, that you shared, which is once again, the degree to which we can vocalize and voice our body's desires. I feel like that again gets threaded back to our biological family. Were our needs respected? Were they invited? At the dinner table, were we told to finish our plate of food even though we didn't want to? I had one client who she went to USC, which is a big kind of sorority fraternity college down here. Every weekend, she would go to a party at a fraternity and sleep with a different guy. And when she was a child, it turned out that when someone asked her how she is, her father would answer for her.
Mm.
So she never had any sense of agency over her own body. And we tend to internalize how we were parented. We treat ourselves the way we were parented. And so she not feeling like her body was hers, she would go to all these parties and anyone would just do whatever they wanted with her.
Mm.
And then so you can imagine like the genital armor that builds up after that. But I feel like our ability to voice what we want, even the idea that we can voice what our body wants, it can all get threaded back to whether we learned whether our bodies are here to be honored or here to be subjugated to someone else's use.
Yeah, and perhaps a more subtle version of that is how I was taught, which is, oh, sex is great, but I wasn't taught anything about the context in which to have it or to share it. So that was a wide open thing that I had to navigate. And I was also taught, by the way, that if you turn a man on, if you arouse a man, if a man feels desire for you, you're responsible. And if you're an attractive person, that's a lot of responsibility for a lot of arousal going on out there that somehow it's your fault
Mhm.
that others are experiencing, you know? So I completely agree that these messages are just so essential to really understanding how it is that we then go about either flinging ourselves about or holding ourselves too tightly for that matter, or a weird combination of the two. Because, for example, it can be very clear to express physically what I might like, but emotionally, that's much harder for me to say, I need you to call me such and such, or I need you to write me, or I need you to text me, or I need to know what's going on here on a more emotional level and learn to take care of that aspect of myself.
Mm.
So again, that brings back into Veronique saying, yes, me too. That can bring in this heart sexuality split thing where are we aligned in a multitude of ways, not just with whom we choose to be, but also are we fully with all aspects of ourselves when we are engaging sensually, sexually, intimately? Yeah.
Yes. And of course, going back to your point, Ali, unless we're willing to be vulnerable, and we can only be vulnerable if we feel safe enough to be vulnerable, all of those things will get missed. The necessity of that emotional alignment, attunement, and understanding of what brings safety to our nervous systems.
But wait, Rahi, what do you think about safety? Because to some extent, safety, certainly in the realm of physical survival, like just assuming you're not in a potentially violent situation, some safety is in the dialectic between you and whomever you're with or multiple people you're with. But what I'm gaining more of as I'm getting older is bringing a sense of safety within myself in a way that even if somebody isn't going to respond in the way I'd like them to either physical or emotional expression, that I can still feel in my own integrity, in my own agency, in my own nervous system, and in my true age, rather than regressing back to a time when I wasn't safe or regressing back to a time when I did take it profoundly personally as a reflection of my own self-worth. Whereas now I'm able to go, wait a minute, this isn't about me actually. Whether they're into me or not, or whether they want me or not, it doesn't necessarily shake my self-worth or my sense of safety. But safety is a fascinating thing. Ultimately, it does so much have to do, as you were just mentioning, with the nervous system, and can I stay regulated regardless of how this person does or doesn't respond to me?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it really calls on each of us to understand what brings safety in our intimate situations, what we need to feel safe so our bodies respond the way we want them to. And if those conditions are not there, how to vocalize and ask for them or get
or
the help.
or get the hell out.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Which hopefully is possible. There are times when that isn't possible, and then
Yeah.
you've got an assault situation or whatever.
Right. And I do want to touch upon this because I think it's really important to say, which is we're saying get the hell out of there. For a lot of nervous systems that go into freeze
Yeah.
or that have been conditioned to fawn, it's not such an accessible option to get the hell out of there. There may be, like, if I was a child and I couldn't get the hell out of there, I will develop strategies to make myself feel safe enough or get my needs met until I can get the hell out of there. And that's what a lot of people's unconscious strategies resort to out of survival. When your safety is being threatened, you will take the shower in the bathroom or have dinner and wait until that person's asleep drunk and then get an Uber and get out of there. That's what it's like. Our systems know how to survive.
I'm so glad you brought that up. So let's talk a little more about that, about trauma and how prevalent it is. And of course, our clients I shouldn't say of course, because on one hand, I go, well, our clients are self selecting. More than likely, our clients have experienced some degree of sexual trauma. But I think it's indicative of the population at large as well. The difference being that tons of people have experienced some kind of sexual trauma, but there's only a small portion of the population that is going to seek help for it, either because of shame or, let's face it, because of expense or because of inavailability to finding people that will be able to help them.
I'll also say a lot of men don't realize that they were violated. Like,
Yes.
I had a client, it was a couple, and his first sexual encounter was when he was 5. He said it was another child in my neighborhood. I said, "Well, how old was she?" And he said she was 9. And then that started a pattern where he said when he was 12 or 13, he would have affairs with the principal and teachers. It never registered to him that was sexual or physical abuse. He developed early. There was nobody at home. He had nowhere to go to. Predators pick up on that. But a lot of men who are taken advantage of don't even register that as sexual or physical abuse.
Yes. And I wanted to add to that. Some of that is certainly because of the messaging that cisgender boys get, which is
Yes.
that sex is always supposed to be good. Like you always want sex. You think with your dick. You're a sex machine. Sex is a positive thing. If you're lucky enough to get it, you should be enjoying it. And your dick is hard. So therefore, you must have wanted it. And you must not have had any problem with it when it's happening. But what I've found with multiple people, either clients or lovers, is that just because they're aroused by it, they tend to be profoundly confused by it as well, which can lead to a lot of hypersexuality because they're trying to figure it out. Well, it was arousing and I was being validated and I was wanted and I liked it, but it was scary. So I need to keep repeating it in order to somehow detangle this jumble of conflicting experiences. Well, I felt proud, but I was also kind of ashamed and I loved it, but I was afraid. And I think they liked me, but they were kind of mean to me too.
Yeah. What comes up for me is there's so many instances when a child is sexually violated and they know it's wrong. They feel the shame of their perpetrator, but they like the attention. Or, as you're pointing out, there's some pleasure in an arousal. So these things get wired. Ple-
Yes.
Physiological arousal and pleasure with, let's say, shame. Or there's so many clients who have paired arousal with humiliation, for example, because they were humiliated as a child. Now they can only get sexually aroused with humiliation. Or it could be being mistreated. It could be being ignored and then having the attention feel like this at last, it's like a euphoric, oh, I knew they loved me. So once again, these pairings, these wirings that happen for all of us as children, but when there is a sexual erotic charge involved, it is so powerful, especially if the perpetrator is of a higher voltage of erotic charge. If you're being violated by someone who's gone through puberty and you have not yet gone through puberty, there's such an overwhelm that oftentimes that becomes the association with a desired sexual experience. I need to be overwhelmed with charge.
Yes. Yeah.
The wiring happens when we're children, teens, and can carry on into our adulthood where we think that sexual erotic pleasure can only come in the package of what we experienced when we were young.
Mm. Yeah. Those arousal templates are powerful. I do a class on that. And I love that you're talking about what's fired together, wires together, and how limiting that can be. Particularly, for example, if you're molested or messed with or aroused or whatever you want to call it by somebody of the same or a different gender,
Mm.
but your authentic identification is other than what that gender is. It can really be confusing for people because if they were born gay, for example, but then somebody of a different gender arouses them in a stressful situation, a confusing situation, but there was arousal. And as Rahi's talking about, there seemed to be love and care and attention. Oh my God, what does that make me? Because now I'm responding to a different gender when really I desire, at least romantically and sexually, I'm wanting to be with the same sex. So if there's arousal with the opposite sex, but there's really an indigenous desire to be with the same sex, then there can be this confusion. Well, does that mean I'm not really gay, that I'm actually bisexual? Or does that mean that I just have certain wirings that have fired together and that these are two different kinds of arousal, two different contexts of arousal, and two very different psychological environments of arousal that can be very confusing and deeply upsetting to people. So, Rahi, you certainly work with that too. And one of the things I love about doing personal geometry with that kind of a situation is they can actually map out, well, with female people, I map myself, I'm here and they're there and sex is there. But with the same gender, that map is somewhere else. And I can actually visualize, wait, this is actually much closer and it feels more comfortable. And the other one feels stressful and like it's threatening and coming in at me. And actually work with it in this physicalized way to better understand which one feels the best and how can I work with this arousal state that may not be in alignment with where my heart wants to go, where my intimacy wants to go. And Rahi spoke to that on my podcast, I think. How do you work with people who are highly aroused by disturbing things that may be destructive? I worked for years at the Center for Healthy Sex with people who are having all kinds of compulsive sex that was quite destructive, not because there was lots of it or with lots of different people, but because it was causing conflict either within them or within their agreed upon commitments and family bonds. What do you want to say about that, Rahi? That was a lot,
Yeah.
but
What I want to say is that what you said earlier, things that fire together, wire together, you can also rewire. And we're very Pavlovian in that way,
yeah.
where if there's an unhealthy wiring, let's say between arousal and humiliation, you can rewire. I mean, what I found in my work is that when there is a increased voltage of sexual pleasure, and that increased voltage of sexual pleasure is wired with a new association that can often create a new neural groove in the psychosomatic erotic pathway that gives the person an alternative choice. For example, I use this as an example because it was a client. He was a gay boy in the Midwest. His father used to kick him with his leather boots, and he wired this humiliation, erotic pleasure with leather. He had to have sex with strangers and leather and be humiliated. So imagine the kind of sex he was experiencing. It was more of a psychological charge, not a physiological pleasure. And so we mapped his genitalia and whole body so he could really understand where the pockets of heightened erotic pleasure were. And as he experienced that with qualities of safety and choice, that created a neural pathway in his brain where he was still excited to that initial charge because the neural pathway, the groove was decades deep. It didn't go away, but at least now he has a choice. He's not always needing to go to that one way. He had a choice to go another way.
And in that choice, it can be incorporated with a lover in role playing or in play of some kind rather than as this imperative to be endangered or feel disempowered or lessened in some way. So basically, what we're both talking about, Rahi, is rewiring. We, in our
Wiring.
own ways, in the ways we work with people, we're helping people rewire and build and discover new neural pathways that are more conducive to the kind of pleasure and satisfaction and authenticity that they're seeking and
Yes,
deserve. I
absolutely.
love that. I love lots of things about our conversations. And one of them is that we have so much beautiful overlap in what we're doing, and yet we have our own distinct way of doing it. So what a
Totally.
great conversation, and we're gonna have to wrap up soon, but I just wanna go and see if anybody has anything they want to ask in these last minutes or make comments. Let me just see.
Nice.
Yes.
Great.
So beautiful comment. Just like you're talking about, I still want risk and intense sensation, but now with agency, choice, creativity, and fun. Exactly. And that's a whole other conversation too, Rahi, which would open up a whole other barrel of fish, which is kink, and how kink can be used consciously or very much unconsciously, and just keep grinding that groove, going over and over what might be destructive and debilitating in some way, or it can be used in a really powerful way to understand, make conscious, and give agency and tremendous pleasure to people who are exploring whatever that power dynamic is or whatever the content is. So that's a whole
Totally.
other conversation.
It's a juicy one. My partner, who's also a somatic sex educator, Ariel, and I have been creating scenarios where we felt disempowered sexually and in the bedroom, and kind of role playing to create new stories in our bodies about those circumstances. And that could be really fun and juicy.
You guys should give that workshop and teach us how to do that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. All righty. Well, any other questions? And if not, we're going to sign off. Is there anything else you want to add, Rahi? Anything else you're either have coming up that you want to tell us about?
Yeah, currently I'll be teaching the 3 keys to genital de-armoring, which is my signature course. A new cohort starts on January 14th. And in about a week, I'll be launching 2 other courses, Reclaiming Your Pleasure and Turned On by Touch. And all of that info can be found on my website. Thanks so much for hosting this, Allie. This was really
Oh,
cool.
my pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it. I love talking to you, Rahi. And somebody in the chat said, when are we going to do a workshop together in California? So maybe we need to start scheming that one for when I'm back in May. That would be really fun to do something. And I am also teaching personal geometry, my 8-week class coming up. The next cohort starts in March. So stay posted, be on our mailing lists, and you'll find out what we're up to. And thank you again for being here. It was really special to be here with you all.
Yeah, it was great. I want to say, Allie, I've never heard the word indigenous used the way you did when you said indigenous desires. I love that. I'm going to use that a lot now. What's
Right
an
on.
indigenous desire?
That's excellent. All right, beautiful people. Let's just keep loving out there because the world sure does need it. So, wishing you every blessing and lots of love, pleasure, and authenticity as you make your way.
Lots of love, everyone. Take good care.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Brilliant Body Podcast. To continue exploring your body's brilliance, visit the show notes for resources and free events. And if you'd like to learn more about working with me, visit alimezey.com. And one more thing. There's a reason podcasters blab on about ratings and reviews. They truly help these conversations reach more bodies who are ready to reclaim their brilliance too. And it's so easy. You just go to the main page of the show and look for those 5 stars. Follow us if you haven't already. And best of all, write a rave review. I'd so appreciate it. It only takes a moment, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. And as always, and more so than ever, keep reclaiming your brilliant body.